And that, class, is why you should never invade a planet full of Deathworlders, Professor Zyx'nax concluded, his tentacles waving dramatically. A hesitant appendage rose from the back of the classroom. But, Professor, surely the humans can't be that bad. I mean, they're so squishy. The professor's eye stalks swiveled towards the brave or foolish student. Ah, Blorp, Blorp, I see you've volunteered for today's object lesson. How kind of you. The gelatinous blob that was Blorp, Blorp quivered slightly, realizing too late that curiosity and classroom participation were overrated. Now then, Zyx'nax continued, slithering towards a holographic projector. Let's take a look at some human military history, shall we? Try not to lose your lunch, all three of them. The projector flickered to life, displaying scenes that made half the class wish they'd stayed in their spawning pools that morning. This, my dear students, is what humans call the art of war. Yes, they actually consider planetary devastation an art form. Charming, isn't it? Images flashed by, trenches filled with mud and misery, tanks rolling over landscapes that would make most species cry uninhabitable, and aircraft that seemed to defy the laws of physics and common sense. But wait, gurgled another student. Couldn't we just, reason with them? The professor's laughter sounded like a garbage disposal choking on a fork. Reason? With humans? Oh, you sweet summer child, these are creatures who looked at the most inhospitable parts of their own world and said, "Yep, let's live there." More scenes played out. Humans scaling sheer cliffs, diving into crushing ocean depths, and even hurling themselves out of perfectly good aircraft. They call that last one fun, Zyx'nax added helpfully. And don't even get me started on their extreme sports. The class watched in horrified fascination as humans engaged in activities that seemed designed solely to tempt death. Skateboarding, base jumping, and something called cheese rolling that defied explanation. But surely, Blorp Blorp ventured again, they must have some weaknesses? Oh, absolutely, the professor nodded sagely. They're catastrophically vulnerable to, let's see, bullets, blades, blunt force trauma, falls, fire, floods, and food that's slightly past its expiration date. The problem is they just don't seem to care. The hologram shifted to show humans casually walking away from explosions, wrestling large predators, and inexplicably stopping mid-battle for something called a selfie. In conclusion, Zyx'nax said, turning off the projector, if you ever find yourself on a human battlefield, there's only one sane course of action. The class leaned forward eagerly, appendages poised to take notes. Run away. Run far, far away, and hope they don't think chasing you looks fun. As the students filed out, thoroughly traumatized, Professor Zyx'nax allowed himself a smug tentacle twirl. Another successful lesson in xenobiology and the art of staying alive in a galaxy where humans existed. He just hoped none of them would ask about human mating rituals next week. There wasn't enough brain bleach in the universe for that lecture. As the last of the trembling students oozed their way out of the classroom, Professor Zyx'nax settled into his gravity chair with a satisfied gurgle. Just another day in the life of the galaxy's foremost expert on human, well, let's call it eccentricities. He was about to treat himself to a well-deserved cup of liquid nitrogen when a hesitant knock echoed through the room. Zyx'nax's eye stalks drooped. There was always one, wasn't there? Enter at your own risk, he called out, wondering if he should have posted a warning sign on his door. Something along the lines of, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here," seemed appropriate. The door creaked open, revealing a shimmering, iridescent form that seemed to change shape with each passing second. Ah, young Shifty McShapechange, the class polymorph. Professor, Shifty stammered, currently resembling a cross between a startled porcupine and a confused octopus. I have questions. Zyx'nax sighed, his tentacles curling in resignation. Of course you do. Let me guess. You're wondering if you could shapeshift into a human and blend in. Shifty's form rippled with excitement, briefly taking on the appearance of a bobblehead doll. Yes, I mean, think of the research opportunities, the first-hand experiences, the unmitigated disaster waiting to happen. Zyx'nax interrupted dryly. Let me paint you a picture, my ambitious little amoeba. Imagine you've successfully infiltrated human society. You're at one of their social gatherings. A party, I believe they call it. Shifty nodded eagerly, clearly not grasping the horror that was about to unfold. Someone offers you something called tequila. Being the dedicated researcher you are, you accept. And then, in your inebriated state, you forget to maintain your human form. 1 minute you're doing the Macarena, the next you're a puddle of goo on the dance floor. But surely, Shifty began. Oh, it gets better, Zyx'nax continued, warming to his theme. Best case scenario, they mistake you for a new TikTok challenge and you become a viral sensation. Worst case, you end up in a government lab, being poked and prodded by creatures who think hazmat suits are optional workplace attire. Shifty's form wavered uncertainly, cycling through a series of increasingly alarmed expressions. And let's not forget their obsession with documenting everything, the professor added. One selfie with the wrong filter, and suddenly the whole internet knows you're not actually a hipster from Portland, but a blob from Planet X. By now, Shifty had settled into a shape resembling a deflated balloon, all the enthusiasm thoroughly squeezed out. But what if I'm really careful? Came the feeble protest. Zyx'nax's eye stalk swiveled in what might have been pity or possibly just exasperation. My dear student, these are creatures who invented parkour, Tide Pod challenges, and something called Florida Man. Careful isn't in their vocabulary. Shifty slumped, now looking like a sad sack of potatoes with eyes. I see. Thank you, Professor. I think I need to lie down now, possibly for several cycles. As the thoroughly demoralized student slithered out, Zyx'nax allowed himself a small chuckle. Crisis averted. The galaxy was safe from yet another potential interspecies incident, and he could finally enjoy his liquid nitrogen in peace. Still, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of, was it envy? After all, humans did seem to have a knack for making life interesting. Terrifying, yes, but never boring. Shaking off the unsettling thought, Zyx'nax turned to his computer. Time to prepare for next week's lecture. Why, hold my beer are the 3 most dangerous words in the human language. The universe might not be ready for humans, but at least his students would be prepared. Or, at the very least, they'd know when to run. As the chrono orb on his desk pulsed, signaling the end of office hours, Professor Zyx'nax began packing up his tentacle case. Another day, another dozen minds, scarred by the realities of human existence. He was just about to slither out when his communicator buzzed with an incoming transmission. Oh, what fresh hell is this? He muttered, activating the holoscreen. The image that flickered to life made him wish he'd ignored the call. It was Dean Quarp, the gelatinous blob in charge of the Xenological Studies Department, and judging by the violent shade of puce he'd turned, this wasn't a social call. Zyx'nax, the dean burbled, his speech bubbles forming faster than a human could say lawsuit. We have a situation. The Galactic Education Board is sending an inspector tomorrow. Zyx'nax felt his chromophore cycle through every shade of oh crap in the spectrum. But surely they can't expect. Oh, it gets better, Quarp interrupted, his form jiggling with agitation. They're sending a human. If Zyx'nax had a jaw, it would have hit the floor. As it was, his lower tentacles went completely numb. A human? Here? In our hallowed halls of higher learning and low-gravity lounges? Precisely, Quarp confirmed. Apparently, they feel our curriculum could use a more balanced perspective on human culture. Zyx'nax's mind raced faster than a caffeinated cheetah on rocket skates. But my lectures, my carefully curated slides of human insanity, what if they see... That's why I'm calling you, you overgrown calamari, Quarp gurgled impatiently. You're our resident expert on humans. Your job is to make sure this inspector sees exactly what we want them to see. No unauthorized field trips to the plasma cafeteria. No accidental airlock malfunctions. And for the love of all that's gelatinous, no showing them your lecture on human mating rituals. Zyx'nax shuddered at the memory. He still had nightmares about that PowerPoint presentation. Understood, Dean. I'll do my best to humanize our approach. See that you do, Quarp bubbled ominously. Remember, the fate of our funding, and possibly our entire species, rests in your tentacles. With that cheerful thought, the transmission cut off. Left alone in his office, Zyx'nax slumped into his chair, all 8 of his hearts pounding a samba of dread. A human here, tomorrow? It was like inviting a black hole to a delicate orbital mechanics experiment. He glanced at his lesson plans for the next day. 1-to-1 reasons why humans are walking disaster zones. That probably needed some revision. With a resigned sigh, he pulled up a new document and began typing. Humans, not always trying to kill you, probably. As he worked late into the night, furiously rewriting his entire curriculum to be less humans are terrifying and more humans are interesting, Zyx'nax couldn't shake the feeling that tomorrow was going to be a day for the history books, or possibly the obituaries. Either way, he made a mental note to update his will, just in case. The next morning arrived with all the subtlety of a supernova, finding Professor Zyx'nax bleary-eyed and jittery from a night of frantic revisions and too much cosmic caffeine. He slithered into the faculty lounge, his tentacles clinging to a mug of what the humans ominously called espresso. You look like you've been through a black hole and back, observed Professor Glorp, the sentient fungus who taught interstellar botany. Big night? Zyx'nax's eye stalks swiveled wearily. Human inspector, today. Need I say more? A collective gasp rippled through the lounge, causing several levitating faculty members to drop unceremoniously to the floor. By the great cosmic mushroom, Glorp exclaimed, his spores turning a sickly shade of chartreuse. What are you going to do? Survive, hopefully, Zyx'nax muttered into his espresso. I've rewritten my entire curriculum to be more human-friendly. Did you know they have redeeming qualities? Neither did I until about 3 a.m. this morning. Just then, Dean Quarp oozed into the lounge, his gelatinous form quivering with nervous energy. Attention, everyone. The human inspector will be arriving any minute. Remember, we're aiming for cautiously intrigued rather than abject terror today. And for the love of all that's slimy, no one mentioned the great Zorgon incident of '86. As if on cue, the door to the faculty lounge hissed open, revealing a figure that made every non-human in the room question their life choices. She was tall, by their standards, with a mane of fiery red hair that seemed to defy the laws of gravity. Her smile was wide, revealing far too many teeth for comfort, and her eyes sparkled with an intelligence that was downright unsettling. "Hello, everyone," she chirped, her voice ringing out like a death knell wrapped in cheerfulness. "I'm Dr. Sarah O'Malley, your friendly neighborhood human inspector. I hope you don't mind if I sit in on a few classes today." The silence that followed was so profound you could hear a pin drop, which was impressive considering their anti-gravity floors. Dean Quarp, ever the diplomat, was the first to recover. "Of course, Dr. O'Malley. We're thrilled to have you. In fact, Professor Zyx'nax here was just about to start his lecture on human culture. Weren't you, Professor?" All eyes and various sensory appendages turned to Zyx'nax, who suddenly felt like a deer caught in the headlights of an oncoming starship. Yes, of course," he managed, wondering if it was too late to fake a spontaneous molt. "Right this way, Dr. O'Malley. I'm sure you'll find our perspective on humans illuminating." As he led the way to his classroom, Zyx'nax couldn't shake the feeling that he was a condemned man walking to his own execution. Only instead of a last meal, he'd had a triple espresso, and instead of a priest, he had a human scientist with a clipboard and a worryingly eager expression. The classroom door loomed before them, a portal to what promised to be the most excruciating lecture of his career. With a deep breath, or whatever passed for breathing in his species, Zyx'nax steeled himself and slithered inside. It was time to teach the unteachable, to explain the inexplicable, to make sense of the senseless. It was time to lecture on humanity, to a human. May the cosmic forces have mercy on his soul. As Zyx'nax slithered to his lectern, he was acutely aware of Dr. O'Malley settling into a seat in the front row, her pen poised over her notepad like a predator ready to pounce. The rest of the class, a motley assortment of alien life forms, seemed to be trying their best to melt into their seats. "Right then," Zyx'nax began, his voice only slightly higher than usual. "Today's topic is, humans. A balanced perspective." He glanced at his hastily rewritten notes, silently cursing his sleep-deprived self for thinking jazz hands was an appropriate subtitle. "Now, as we all know, humans are unique creatures," he continued, desperately avoiding eye contact with Dr. O'Malley. "They come from a planet called Earth, which is lovely this time of year, I'm sure." A tentative appendage rose from the back. It was blorp blorp again. Zyx'nax made a mental note to fail him on principle. "Yes, blorp blorp?" he asked, bracing for the worst. "Professor, isn't Earth classified as a death world?" Zyx'nax felt his chromatophores shift to a sickly green. "Well, yes, but—" "Oh, it's not so bad," Dr. O'Malley chimed in cheerfully. "Sure, we have earthquakes, volcanoes, hurricanes, and the occasional pandemic, but that just keeps life interesting." The class stared at her in horror, while Zyx'nax wondered if it was too late to change careers. Maybe he could become a space pirate, or a black hole researcher. Anything seemed safer at this point. "Yes, well," he stammered, "humans have shown remarkable adaptability in the face of such challenges. For instance, did you know they invented something called extreme ironing just to make mundane tasks more exciting?" Dr. O'Malley beamed. "Oh, you've done your research. Have you covered wingsuit flying yet? Or free solo climbing?" The class collectively inched their seats away from her, while Zyx'nax felt his remaining confidence evaporate faster than water on a sun's surface. "We haven't quite gotten to those yet," he managed. "Perhaps we could start with something a bit less intense, like human cuisine, for instance." It was the wrong thing to say. Dr. O'Malley's eyes lit up like supernovas. "Oh, fantastic. Did you know we have a dish called ghost pepper ice cream? It's pain and pleasure in one delicious package." Zyx'nax watched in mounting horror as his carefully reconstructed lecture crumbled before his eyes. Every attempt to portray humans as reasonable, non-terrifying beings was met with an example of human audacity that sent his students into new depths of existential dread. By the time he got to human leisure activities, half the class had developed nervous twitches, and Blorp Blorp had retreated into a protective coma. And that class, Zyx'nax concluded weakly, is why humans are. As the shell-shocked students filed out, many of them muttering about transferring to the quantum physics of watching paint dry course, Dr. O'Malley approached the lectern, her smile still impossibly bright. "That was fascinating, Professor. I especially enjoyed your creative interpretations of human behavior, though I do have a few minor corrections." As she launched into a detailed critique that somehow made humans sound even more terrifying, Zyx'nax found himself longing for the sweet embrace of a black hole. He had a feeling this inspection was going to be very, very long, and somewhere in the cosmos he was sure the universe was laughing at him. As Dr. O'Malley's minor corrections stretched into what felt like an eternity, Zyx'nax found himself wondering if humans had somehow mastered time dilation. He was vaguely aware of his tentacles slowly withering from stress as she regaled him with tales of human achievements that sounded more like thinly veiled suicide attempts. And that's why we decided to send people to the moon using what was essentially a controlled explosion, Dr. O'Malley concluded, her eyes shining with pride. Zyx'nax blinked all 7 of his eyes in rapid succession, trying to process this information. You'd willingly strapped yourselves to explosives to visit a lifeless rock? Of course, she chirped. How else were we supposed to prove we could? Oh, and don't get me started on our Mars plans. Please don't, Zyx'nax muttered. But it was too late. As Dr. O'Malley launched into an enthusiastic explanation of terraforming, complete with vivid hand gestures that made several nearby potted plants wilt in fear, Zyx'nax felt a headache blooming in all 3 of his brains. Suddenly, salvation arrived in the form of Dean Quarp, who oozed into the room with all the grace of a cafeteria spill. "Ah, Dr. O'Malley," the dean burbled, his speech bubbles forming faster than Zyx'nax had ever seen. "I hope you're enjoying your visit. Perhaps you'd like a tour of our state-of-the-art zero-gravity gymnasium?" Dr. O'Malley's eyes lit up like twin supernovas. "Oh, that sounds delightful. Do you have a rock-climbing wall, or perhaps some void-surfing equipment?" As the dean led the enthusiastic human away, throwing a gelatinous look of sympathy over his shoulder, Zyx'nax slumped against his lectern in relief. He had survived. Barely. Just then, Shifty McShapechange poked his ever-changing head back into the classroom. Professor? Is it safe to come out now?" Zyx'nax waved a weary tentacle. Yes, the walking disaster zone has left the premises, though I fear she may return with ideas. Shifty shimmered anxiously, briefly taking the form of a quivering jello mold. "But Professor, I've been thinking, maybe humans aren't so bad. I mean, they seem kind of exciting." Zyx'nax felt a chill run through all 17 of his cardiovascular systems. "Shifty, my dear student, let me impart upon you the wisdom of the ages. Exciting is just another word for potentially fatal when it comes to humans. Remember, curiosity vaporized the Zorgon." "But no buts," Zyx'nax interrupted, his tentacles flailing in exasperation. "The next thing you know, you'll be trying to crowd surf, or bungee jump, or engage in some other thinly veiled death wish they call fun. Now, off you go. I need to rewrite my entire curriculum." Again, as Shifty slunk away, still looking far too intrigued for Zyx'nax's comfort, the professor turned to his computer with a sigh. Time to start on his new lecture series. Humans, why hold my beer are the 3 most dangerous words in the galaxy. Meanwhile, somewhere in the zero-gravity gymnasium, Dr. O'Malley's delighted laughter echoed ominously, accompanied by the sound of Dean Quarp's panicked burbling and what seemed to be the chaos of improvised low-gravity parkour. Zyx'nax shuddered. It was going to be a long academic year. He made a mental note to stock up on liquid nitrogen and to update the university's insurance policy. Something told him they were going to need it. As the sounds of chaos from the zero-gravity gymnasium faded into the distance, Zyx'nax found himself alone in his classroom, surrounded by the detritus of his shattered lesson plans and the lingering aroma of human enthusiasm. He was just about to slip into a well-deserved existential crisis when his communicator buzzed. "Oh, what fresh hell is this?" he muttered, activating the device. The holographic image of Dean Quarp materialized, looking like a gelatin mold that had been put through a blender. "Zyx'nax, emergency faculty meeting, now!" Before he could protest, the transmission cut off. With a sigh that seemed to come from the depths of his soul, or souls, given his unique biology, Zyx'nax slithered towards the conference room. He arrived to find a scene of utter pandemonium. Professor Glorp was sprouting distress spores in every direction, coating nearby furniture in a fine mist of panic. The quantum physics teacher, Dr. Schrödinger, no relation, was simultaneously there and not there, clearly unable to decide which state was preferable. And in the center of it all was Dean Quarp, looking like he'd aged a century in the past hour. "Colleagues," the Dean burbled as Zyx'nax took his seat, "we have a situation." "Did the human break the planet?" someone asked from the back. "Worse," Quarp replied. "She's impressed with our facilities." A collective gasp rippled through the room, causing several levitating faculty members to drop to the floor. "But that's good, isn't it?" ventured the ever-optimistic Professor Sunshine, the sentient ball of plasma, who taught stellar sociology. "You don't understand," Quarp oozed miserably. "She's so impressed that she's recommended our university for what?" Zyx'nax asked, dreading the answer. "Or for the intergalactic student exchange program." The silence that followed was so profound that you could hear a quark split. "You mean?" Zyx'nax began, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes," Quarp confirmed. "Starting next semester, we'll be hosting human students, and in return—" "Don't say it," Glorp moaned, his fungal cap drooping. "We'll be sending some of our students to Earth." The room erupted into chaos. Professor Schrödinger finally decided to fully materialize, if only to faint dramatically. Glorp's distress spores reached critical mass, turning the air into a psychedelic haze. And Zyx'nax, he just sat there, wondering if it was too late to resign and take up a nice, safe career as a black hole taste tester. Now, Dean Quarp attempted to calm the room, his gelatinous form rippling with forced optimism. "This could be a wonderful opportunity for cross-species understanding." "Understanding," Zyx'nax found his voice at last. "Dean, have you forgotten the great Zorgon incident of '86? One human with a skateboard and a hold-my-beer attitude, and poof, an entire civilization vaporized." "That was never conclusively proven," Quarp countered weakly. "Oh, please," Zyx'nax scoffed. "Next you'll be telling us that Tide Pod challenge was just a harmless prank." As the faculty descended into heated debate, with suggestions ranging from politely decline to evacuate the planet immediately, Zyx'nax felt a headache blooming in all three of his brains. He could see it now. Human students turning the anti-gravity chambers into impromptu skate parks, challenging the black hole in the astrophysics lab to a staring contest. Or worst of all, introducing their alien classmates to the concept of spring break. And somewhere out there in the cosmos, Zyx'nax was sure he could hear the universe laughing at them all. As the faculty meeting devolved into a cacophony of panicked alien noises, Zyx'nax found himself drifting into a stress-induced fugue state. Visions of human students wreaking havoc across campus flashed before his eyes. Zero-gravity food fights in the cafeteria, impromptu extreme sports in the particle accelerator, and heaven forbid, attempts to liven up the annual faculty mixer with something called karaoke. He was jolted back to reality by Dean Quarp's gelatinous appendage slamming against the table. "Enough," the dean burbled, his speech bubbles forming in bold, capital letters. "Like it or not, this is happening. We need solutions, not panic." The room fell silent, save for the soft whimpers coming from the huddled mass that was once Professor Schrödinger. Zyx'nax felt all eyes and various other sensory organs turn to him. Of course, he was the human expert after all. Resigning himself to his fate, he cleared his throat, or what passed for one in his species. "Well," he began, trying to inject some confidence into his voice, "perhaps we could channel their energy." "Channel it where?" Professor Glorp asked suspiciously. "Into a black hole?" "Tempting, but no," Zyx'nax replied. "I mean, provide them with outlets for their unique proclivities. For instance, we could convert the old quantum flux chamber into an extreme sports arena. It's already reinforced to withstand reality warping events, so it should hold up to whatever the humans throw at it." A murmur of cautious approval rippled through the room. Emboldened, he continued, and for our students going to Earth, we'll need intensive training, endurance courses, disaster simulations, and for the love of all that's cosmic, extensive lessons on why accepting drinks from strangers at places called frat parties is a terrible idea. What about cultural integration? Piped up Professor Xenon, the noble gas who taught interstellar ethics. Zyx'nax pondered for a moment. We'll need to update our curriculum, add classes on human history, culture, and why, despite all evidence to the contrary, they haven't managed to accidentally destroy themselves yet. And maybe a seminar on deciphering human idioms. The last thing we need is some poor alien student taking its raining cats and dogs literally and causing an interstellar incident. As he spoke, Zyx'nax could see a glimmer of hope returning to his colleague's eyes and other visual receptors. Even Dean Quark's gelatinous form seemed to be firming up slightly. This could work, the Dean said, a note of cautious optimism in his burble. Professor Zyx'nax, I'm putting you in charge of the Human Integration Committee. Your first task, draft a student handbook that won't cause mass panic. Zyx'nax felt a mix of pride and existential dread wash over him. I'll do my best, Dean, though I suggest we invest in a lot more insurance and maybe a bunker, just in case. As the meeting adjourned, with faculty members buzzing with a mixture of excitement and terror, Zyx'nax couldn't help but feel he'd just signed up for the greatest challenge of his academic career. Shuffling back to his office, he began mentally composing the first draft of the new student handbook. Chapter 1. Why hold my beer is not a valid reason for any action in this or any other galaxy. Meanwhile, somewhere on Earth, a group of unsuspecting human students were about to receive acceptance letters to a very unique study abroad program. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all.